Hello friends, and my name is Amayanja Fazil. Welcome to The Breakdown. It is coming to a year by next week on the 18th and 19th of November. It will be a year since Museveni's regime massacred people in Kampala, killing over, I think it was around 64 people had been murdered. Museveni's narrative was that these people had been protesters and they were trying to stage an insurrection. But what is ironic about Museveni's statement on that particular issue is that we had pregnant mothers that were killed as well as children. Now, to me, in my own understanding of this event or this incident, I have looked at it as a turning point in the entire fight against the Museveni regime by the National Unity Platform or by His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu. Because what is very interesting is that ever since Museveni murdered and massacred these people, Uganda has never been the same again. And the way he's doing his kind of politics and his kind of stuff actually changed from that point on. Because it is after this event that we saw the firing of the then Deputy Inspector General of Police, a gentleman known as Sabiti Museveni, and then the coming of a one Lokech Paul, who has now left us, who died recently a couple of months ago. But then you also realize that Museveni, like I've spoken about this particular incident in the past, he realized that he made one of the worst blunders, because that's one thing you cannot do during, after, or within an election year. You also know very well that the massacres that took place in Kasese, they were actually in his throat, strangling him in one way or the other. When Museveni was told to bring the perpetrators of these crimes, the people who killed innocent Ugandans, up to today he has never produced anyone in court. He has never produced anyone in any of the reports. Even a report is not even out there, which is interesting. But we understand that the pressure mounted when cultural leaders, that is to say the Kabaka of Uganda, came out and tasked Museveni's regime to produce the perpetrators of this particular crime. Until this day, they have not been brought to book. But what followed the Kabaka's request or the Kabaka's push is that Museveni introduced a law that affects the Kabaka's subjects, or that affects the people who live in Buganda, that is the central region, including Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, as well as most people who come from Buganda and who live in Buganda. That law came to be known as the Milo Land Tenure System, or the Milo Land Law, where they wanted to make changes in order to affect these people so that they can keep quiet. For me, that is how I looked at it. But then you also, this event actually has tarnished the Museveni regime, and they don't know how to go about it because it destroyed his public relations. Even the people who were still skeptical about the man, that he's not a brute or this kind of stuff, literally this was blown out of proportion, that by massacring innocent people, by openly firing guns at people and being captured on camera and all this kind of stuff, literally no one could have actually come out and do any sorts of issues like protecting that kind of behavior. Now, what we saw that has happened ever since, because we do understand Ugandans were pushing back a lot on this particular incident, and trust me, it was putting a lot of pressure on Museveni. I always wish that we never stopped. I always wish that we never stopped to demand, and not to wait for anniversaries, to demand for accountability for the death of these particular people. But now what we understand now is that after Museveni introduced the Milo Land system, he took our parliamentarians, people he saw himself in, but then took the parliamentarians, creating these diversions, into investigating things known as livelihood programs that take people out of poverty, which I actually call programs that put people into poverty. The one program known as Emyoga, something of that sort, or the parish model, that kind of crap. So he got these new MPs and tasked them to look into that particular issue, instead of these new MPs starting with the indictment, starting with creating, this kind of stuff, and working on the issue of investigating the November massacres. I know it's not yet, time is not yet over, and all this kind of stuff, but we still have time to do this. But you also understand that these MPs are the ones that are supposed to also set up commissions to investigate such kind of issues. So what Museveni did, for that matter, he engaged them into by-elections and all this kind of stuff. He has put them into a myoga to investigate them in order to divert them. Then all of a sudden, what we see is the ultimate prize that he has employed, which is called the massacres, the massacres. You see, these things are chronological, and the way they are leading up to each other, you have to go back to where everything turned. What was the turning point? And I personally believe that the turning point of this entire campaign, or the fight against the dictatorial regime of the Museveni crime family, started on the November 18th as well as 19th, where he massacred over 64 people who were innocent in Kampala. So ever since that point, we see these events that are happening. Now, I was still explaining to you that what happened afterwards is the fact that parliamentarians were put into by-elections, and now we went into the so-called massacre murders, whereby people were being massacred with machetes, and people were put in a lot of fear, and they were being slaughtered all over the place and all this kind of stuff. Actually, before that, I would also like to reiterate a particular incident that was really big this year, as well as, following up on the November 18th and 19th, massacres, is the issue of the attempted assassination of Major General Katumba Wamala, because we do understand Katumba Wamala also comes from the same area, or he shares the same tribe as Mr. Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, also shares the same tribe as the Kabaka of Buganda. He's the Kabaka's subject, by the Kabaka demanding accountability of the people who were killed on November 18th and 19th. It was putting it, of course it was going to be troublesome for any high-ranking officials of the Kabaka's subject. And we also understand, by such kind of things happening, Museveni decided it even affected his cabinet that he chose. You will see the appointments that he made in his cabinet were more from the Western Uganda as well as the Northern Uganda, what I literally call the Northern Alliance. And now what we see is as well that the positions in government, most of them that he created, his government that he created, he has been dashing them out mostly to people from the North, as well as people from, some people from the West, in one way or the other, someone might argue. You can see it in the speakership, you can see it in banking, in the ministries and all this kind of stuff. So no high-ranking officer comes from the central region, and that was actually affected by the November 18th and 19th massacres. The massacres, yeah. The massacres happened as a result when His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu was arrested in eastern part of Uganda, in a district known as Luka. When he was arrested, that is where people, rose up and tried to stage peaceful protests in one way or the other. But then, those protests have been widely covered. You can go out there and look up and, read about them. Then we saw the coming of the BBC documentary known as The Three Killings in Kampala, where the BBC narrowed down on particular types of killings that actually tarnished Museveni's name more in one way or the other. So from all that, I'm also going to look at the international reaction and how this affected his international connections and this kind of stuff. But let me first finish the Ugandan one, and then we go to that. So what happened here is the fact that the machete massacres that happened in Masaka and the surrounding districts, all of a sudden what happened next is the fact that Museveni then decided to arrest two parliamentarians, that is Sewanyana as well as Segirinya, who belong to Bobi Wine's political party, and also who come from the central region where people were murdered and massacred, and also who, one would say that, belong to their Kabaka's subjects in one way or the other. So these people were arrested. Up to now, they are still behind bars. But then we see another element that comes in known as the bail, whereby Museveni is arguing that we should be scrapping the bail and all this kind of stuff. But now you do understand that, okay, all this has happened and then a year has gone by, and now we are going back from where we started with the November 18th and 19th massacres that happened. Trust me, by all these moves that Museveni has been making, the element of the November 18th and 19th massacre is within there. It is embedded somewhere in there. Here is the point. Museveni relies so much on Western aid as well as Western connections and all this kind of stuff. By massacring people, by doing all these sorts of things, right? Over 80 people were massacred, 64 people were massacred. Even people within Africa who were his friends, none wanted to be, to openly show his support for him or to praise him like it had been in the past elections. None. Of course, the US issued a statement and all this kind of stuff, but even his international friends that have been, brushing these things away and all this kind of stuff are trying to see how to maneuver the thing. So they are telling Museveni, what you have to do literally is make sure that you make up as many stories as possible or diversions so as to cover up the November massacre. And that's why it brings you to the ADF issue and this so-called terrorism that is happening in the country. Because when you do a survey in the country, people will say that we do not believe that those people that they are claiming it is ISIS, it's really ISIS. No people will believe that. Trust me. So he is literally handling the situation in the wrong way. Now, what is funny is that Museveni cannot bring people to justice that committed these murders. Because by doing that, it really makes his soldiers, the so-called Special Forces Command, who were part of this operation, it makes them think twice in any way or in any time if at all such an operation is required to be executed, because they realize that, wait a minute, Museveni might throw us under the bus. And with the coups that are happening all over the continent, he's definitely scared. So, even the Western world, it has been so hard now for this entire year. It has actually been so hard for them on how they deal with the gentleman. Because they are looking at it like, okay, if we see, I've seen so many things have been happening, but they are not happening at the level at which they were happening in 2016, right? So when they deal with him, people always bring up the idea that, look here, you're dealing with a mass murderer who massacred his own people. 64 people were killed, including children and pregnant mothers were killed. How would you deal with such an individual? He has not provided a report. He has not provided an independent investigation. How could you deal with such a person? And that's why you see now people like Joe Biden and all this kind of stuff, they are inviting people like Uhuru Kenyatta, they are being invited left, right, and center. The Kagames are going to COP, not to say that they are the best, but what I'm trying to say is that Museveni has actually sunk at the bottom of is at the bottom pits. He's doing things, making him to be at the lowest of the low. That he does. No one warrants to be, no one would like to be actually dealing with him to show himself that they are really, really, really tight buddies with Museveni, which is funny, isn't it? So, what is my takeaway point as I wind this episode up? My takeaway point is that we should never forget people that have been massacred. We should never forget people that have been unjustly killed and extrajudicial killings that have been happening, especially the November 18th and 19th massacres. These massacres are iconic. These massacres are ones that we can use in order to pressure the regime, to pressure Museveni and all these other sycophants and people that are around him that were part and parcel of, or that oversaw these particular operations. Of course, Museveni is not going to surrender them. But by BBC doing the documentary and all this kind of stuff, it really helped a lot to bring this situation to light. And trust me, it is still in Museveni's neck. Because there's no way you can defend this. For example, if you look at the incident that happened in Kasese in 2016, where they killed over 100 people and buried them in a mass grave, Museveni managed to go to the ICC, and the ICC quashed that case because of the Dominic Ongwen case that the ICC wanted to show to the world that, okay, look here, we have done something about Joseph Kony. And because Museveni was helping them in the Dominic Ongwen case, so they decided, okay, Kasese case, out. Ongwen case, win. That's how it happened. But now, you have no leverage or anything of that sort. Meaning that these massacres, at some point in time, they are going to be very important, especially with His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, and how he's going to use them in order to exert more pressure. Or they can even be used, because Museveni, I wouldn't like to put this argument out there, but I will leave it for another time. But these massacres, in any negotiations that are likely to take place, in anything that is likely to take place, justice for these families will always be somewhere in these negotiations, and it is going to be somewhere in if not center stage in anything that is to happen, in our beautiful country, Uganda. So, guys, lest we forget our brothers and sisters that were innocently killed, extrajudicially assassinated and massacred by the Museveni regime, women, children, the disabled, mothers and fathers, all of them right now are still in tears. It is really sad. So that is the critical importance of the November 18th and 19th massacre, especially for people who are, especially people who are the option in this day and age. For Museveni, it is still a nightmare that is over his head. Now, some people might say that Museveni is a murderer that does not care how many people he kills. Yes, Museveni doesn't care how many people get killed or are killed, if at all it does not disrupt his grip on power, or if at all it does not disrupt his connections and his financial aid that he receives from foreigners, and his relation with the foreign people. But if any killing or any murder, even if it's one person that affects those things that I've mentioned there, then Museveni cares. Then Museveni becomes panicky in one way or the other and doesn't know how to traverse that particular situation. Okay, guys, thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up, share the video, like and comment, and let us meet in the next video. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.